You're back, so am I. I'll explain this in a second, guys. Hopefully it doesn't happen again. At least 40 of you have come back. But I think there was about 160 people watching when that happened. Just firstly, guys, can you hear what I'm saying? If someone could just post a message if they can hear the audio. Thanks, Brad. Yeah, what just happened was my phone rang, and when my phone rang, it cut the live video stream off. So sorry about that cutout. I've just make sure that my phone is fixed. I'll just put my phone onto airplane mode, so hopefully this interruption doesn't happen again, and we'll get most people back shortly, I'm sure. And I know what question I was answering, but unfortunately I would have lost any questions post Judd Jones' question about the roster process in Sydney. But when Judley comes back, I'll continue with the answer. Just give it a second for those to catch up. Just hope it wasn't a very, very important call. Yes, I haven't had time to shave, Matt, unfortunately. Maybe I'll have one later. It's a bit itchy. Anyway, look, I'll continue with what I was waffling on about rosters in Sydney, and from memory, I think it was Gav's question about the rosters, wasn't it? Not Judley's. Anyway, it's one of you coneheads. Rosters in Sydney, so you've got the SAM roster. I'm not sure if the 380 roster is different than the SAM one. I think it's slightly different. You've got a supervisor's roster and a DMM's roster, an SIT roster, and a maintenance watch roster. And so you've got like about 7 rosters that are extended hours rosters that are approved in Sydney. If they were to move you, say, from Sydney International Terminal to if they were to move you from Sydney International Terminal to another extended hours roster, they can do that. But provision is built into the agreement that at any point in time, it just takes one person to call for a vote on the roster. So they put you onto a roster you don't like, you can say, I don't like this, I want to vote. And then there'll be a vote, and if it goes 50% in favour, the roster stays and they can put you onto it. If it fails, they have to negotiate a new roster or put you onto an 8-hour roster. And thank you, Rod. Look, the previous questions I've lost because I had to start up a new Facebook Live session, and as explained for those who are just coming on now, I had a phone call come through which cut off the live Facebook feed. So that answers the question about rosters. If you don't like it, call for a vote and there can be a new vote. And that can be a bargaining chip as well. We can threaten the company that we're going to have a vote if they don't be reasonable about what they want to put in place in the way of a roster. But bear in mind, the company always has a right to put you on an 8-hour roster if they like. 8-hour roster, of course, is less efficient because 3 8s are 24 and they have to have 3 handovers a day instead of 2. So they lose time when there's a handover. Alrighty, now that we've got most people back, if you could just start asking those questions again, because I just got down to that one about rosters and I've lost all of the others. Unless some of them appear on here, or if Rod can post any that he may remember. Fergus, alrighty. SIO was excluded from voting on the base 12-hour roster, and the base were excluded on voting on SIT rosters. Yes. So the clause in the EBA, Fergus, is and this is a clause that was agreed to after you were an executive member, so you weren't involved in the negotiation of it. The clause talks about who gets to have the vote, and the vote goes to anyone who is proposed or reasonably expected to work the roster in question. So when a vote might have taken place for, say, a SAM roster, I'm not sure when the last roster vote was, say it was 3 years ago, there would have been no expectation that someone from SIT would have worked over in SAM, so the vote wouldn't have been there for the terminal guys, and vice versa, they didn't vote on the SIT roster. But the roster is approved, and someone from the terminal could be put onto that roster if enough people don't like the roster. One or a number can call for a new vote, and if the majority don't like it, the roster goes and there has to be another solution. Rick asks, hi Steve, the 164 positions in Sydney, is the figure over all of SIM, STT, SIT, or is there a specific numbers per section? We haven't been told about any specific numbers per section. They couldn't answer that question when we met with them the other day. So it is, I think they did say though that the 164 is the number in total. And I think that didn't include Maintenance Watch. Matt Elton, are present plans for 787s going to China for maintenance? Why would they send the aircraft to China for maintenance? I have no idea why an airline would do that, but actually, yeah, Qantas told us the other day they're going to send them to China. There was a bit of debate over this point, so we basically put it to them that the 787s could provide or work for people in Australia, and that would be a mitigation that would relieve the number of people that needed to be retrenched. And Qantas's response was along the lines of, we had an agreement when the 787s come that work would be done overseas. And again, we're in a situation where we say, no, we had no such agreement. My recollection of the introduction of the 787 was that we would agree that baggage handlers could do the pushbacks on them, and they would agree to give us 5 points for the aircraft. That was what I understand of the agreement. The agreement, from my recollection, was silent on where the C checks would be done, and we had been pressing all along for those C checks to be done in Australia. Question was asked about the 787. They were asked very specifically, can the 787 fit into a hangar in Australia? The answer was yes. The next question was, do you have docking suitable for 787 C checks? And the answer was no. If anyone from heavy maintenance is here or is watching or can get back to us, our understanding is that the docking in Brisbane was measured to fit 787s and is in the process of being approved, was in the process of being approved, but it was adequate for C checks. That work should be in Australia. We didn't have an agreement with them that it wouldn't be, and it would mean less redundancies. We have put to them a series of questions that they didn't answer and sought further information about that potential job-saving position. Next question, Mickey Two Shoes. How many from Sydney have indicated to the union they'd like to go already? If you can disclose that, I can disclose what I know, and just bear with me. I'll try and bring up the PowerPoint presentation that I made on these numbers if I can find it on my desktop, because I've got like 200 figures on my desktop. Stand by. as of a couple of weeks ago, we had, and I have another diagram on this Excel spreadsheet that probably explains it a bit more. We had 371 responses out of 491 members. I am just tossing up as to how specific I state our returns here, because I think our executive would not be too happy if I shared the exact numbers that we have in our table, but maybe if I can put it a different way, from percentages of returns, an assumption of those who didn't return, an assumption that 30% of the maybes would also leave. Bear in mind, there was those who said they definitely wanted to leave, those who said they may want to leave. We assumed that 30% of them ultimately would leave and 70% of them wouldn't, on the assumption that the same ratios based on our returns in other states would go and vacancies would be created. We think there will be between 70 and 85 people in Sydney still looking for a job somewhere after the Sydney people have already left. Of course, that's very variable and it's based on a lot of things. Like I said earlier in the first video, there might be more who want to leave now knowing that the future is less rosy than it was even a month ago. So maybe 60 people will have to seriously consider a transfer to another port. Like I said, though, that could be wildly variable, and I think I've shared about as much as our executive would permit. Matt Elton, it was discussed. That's 787 question, I think. Any update on the useful work case? I don't know. I had a message from one of our executives the other day that people in Sydney don't really like concentrating or talk of the useful work case. I will explain it. But please don't think that the useful work case is the only thing we're ever working on at the moment. Our priorities at the moment is this redundancy/retrenchment process. The useful work case, however, though, it's in and out of the courtrooms at least once a week and has been for the last month. There's just, we're dealing with a federal court judge, Justice Flick, and he seems to be all over the shop in the way he thinks and says things. At the moment, there is a court date on the 11th of August, where he is hoping that the parties will have a consented position that we both agree on what should happen next, and the questions that are under consideration are, and then there are two elements of the case. One is there work for the engineers to do or not? And we say there is. And the other question is, was the stoppage one which was out of Qantas's control? And we say it wasn't. They decided to stop themselves. In fact, it hasn't even stopped because it's still going. So there are two arms to the case. Justice Katzman has already decided that the stoppage issue is too big for the Fair Work Commission to decide. The new judge, Justice Flick, seems to be in two minds on that issue, but we are thinking that whether there was work or not for you would probably most likely go back to the Fair Work Commission, and then they would analyse all of the data that we can attain on from all your work task cards and so on, from the MXI packages. We've already submitted that and had that all ready for the original case that I think it was like on day one there was 100,000 hours of work, and they were telling people there's no work for you. It's really getting complicated, Matt, in jurisdictional arguments and what is the scope of the various courtrooms to make decisions, and they're important decisions. The stoppage issue, if we win it, could extend to every Qantas employee, because basically there would be a declaration that they weren't permitted to stop flying. They as a business would have to bear the ebbs and flows of the business that they are running. It's not for an employee to share the low whilst we don't share the high, because they don't give us a bloody bonus. So it could flow onto everyone, which would make it a very big question. I think some people are a little bit concerned about us talking about those things because, I don't know, there's some rumour going around that we could send Qantas bankrupt. We don't think that's even remotely possible, because if I have a look back through ASX announcements, I think you'll find that Qantas have spent a lot of money in the previous years buying shares back, and they've just refloated, I think, $1 billion worth. So they're getting another $1 billion in their back pocket, and if they want to raise cash, they can just float shares again. They don't seem to care how many shares are around at the moment. So there's no danger of Qantas going bankrupt through this process, and we will be pushing for every entitlement that our members are due. Matt Ray, I think they responded that the decision to do them there has already been made, and that we were not capable to do the work here, which is bullshit. That's a 787 question. I suspect that people here would be able to do the 787 work. Anyway, Andrew asks, just a comment B, surely Qantas sending work to China wouldn't go down well in the media right now. There's some negative sentiment about China out there at the moment. It would not be something that I would intentionally or deliberately play on. I'm actually more concerned about things that happen in America these days. They're the ones who seem to not have the virus under control, which is spreading it in the world and ruining our industry. If I was to mention something about aircraft going to China now, it wouldn't be welcome. But I think any focus on any media that may or may not flow out of this would probably be best targeted at keeping jobs in Australia, your jobs. And I think an Australian focus would be better to mention than necessarily focusing so much on China, which I've never had a problem with in the past. I just think it's very contentious right now. In the past we've had concerns because English is not their first language, and there's been errors on aircraft. Certainly though, that work should be in Australia. From Kez, I'd seriously consider a transfer to another port. Given that the borders are closed for the time being, how would this likely play out? Kez, if you were to transfer to Melbourne, might be a little bit more, the weather might be a little bit closer to what you grew up with, and just on border closures and moving, I really don't know exactly what the rules are at the moment, but I do know my cousin 2 weeks ago moved to Queensland, and I think it was in relation to the fact that she no longer had an address in Victoria because she sold her house and she had purchased a new one in Queensland, so she was allowed to move to Queensland. I think at the moment people from New South Wales are allowed to come to Victoria, which for me is a very important matter, because I've been without my partner for the last month because she's stuck in Sydney and I'm stuck in Melbourne, and there's talk of the Victorian border being closed, but I think it's just a one-way closure, and we are watching that very closely. But I think if you move, I would imagine you'd go to the new state and there'd be a 14-day quarantine period, and then you could work there. And I think the concern is probably more important right now, because for me, I don't know when these borders are going to be fully open again. I think they opened them too early in the first place. Fergus, the media got free flights on the 787 delivery flight. Flights for favourable comments. Never rely on the media to defend workers. That's very, very true. Some of our favourite people in the media, like the aviation expert Sir Geoffrey Thomas, is regularly on those special flights and tours on aircraft. I actually had a chat with Jeffrey Thomas the other day to try and make our relationship, that is the ALAEA's relationship, a little bit better with him. And my view now is that, look, if nothing else, I can talk to him before he goes on telly and tell him something about the mechanics of an aircraft so that he doesn't make errors when he's putting a point forward. But you are right, Fergus, there are a lot of people in the media out there who are too scared to say anything negative about Qantas, and then there are others that don't have a problem. If I make comments about Qantas in the press, I might present 7 or 8 lines or statements for that reporter to use, and then I might see one of them appear in an article, and then there's always the counter argument by the airline that there's usually something that's unqualified or just completely ridiculous, like, oh no, there's no problem on with COVID on our aircraft because we've got HEPA filters. So things like this always continually go unchallenged, and my statements are always kept reasonably brief. Just saw Dave Andrews is watching. I thought it was Daniel Andrews, but I don't think he'd be watching. Andrew, true Fergus, but the public support may well be a lot higher right now. You're right, Andrew. And look, one thing that I'll just talk to you guys about press, and it's really difficult for us as a union to get our point of view out there in the press. And generally, I think the rule is you don't get in the press unless there's death, fire, or an aircraft crash or something similar. And it's hard to be out there all of the time. I hate doing media. I don't get nervous or anything. It's just, for me, it's just like a waste of, like, if I have to go on television at night, I'm studying for 4 hours to make sure that I don't make mistakes and I know the content of what I'm talking about. It's just a pain in the bloody ass, and but it's a necessary component of us having at least some profile so that we can build some respectability up when we do talk. So I don't know, over the last couple of years, a few times I've gone in and sat on Sky News panel programs talking about politics and other garbage that is important for some people to watch. So it's a very fine balance doing the media and getting a jab in at Qantas or whoever might deserve it. Delicate talking about China or other countries, but I don't know. We try and do the best we can, but there's a lot of water to go under the bridge when it comes to this VR/retrenchment process. And yeah, it's up our sleeve to talk about 787 maintenance in Australia. Lubna, agree. USA is the biggest threat now. Their stupidity is unrivaled. It's farcical watching the events in the United States. I watch CNN a lot, and they just keep on repeating a comment that Donald Trump made, and it was in March, and I think his comment was, there are only 15 cases in this country, and they're going to magically disappear very soon because we're so great at the way we've handled this. 15 cases, and he was so patting himself on the back at how well they've handled it because they were going to magically disappear. Yeah, I'm concerned about everything that comes out of Yankee Tank Land. Alphonse McHale's watching. He usually disagrees with me when I say things like that on Facebook, but anyway, we all have our different views. Jason Stewart, Fergus Haynes, never rely on the media for any semblance of truth. Media's heavily biased based on who their sponsors are, of course. ABC is not funded by anyone trying to make profit, funded by the government, who you would think would side with the government. The government say they're always too left, but anyway. Right, another question, and keep posting now, guys, because I'll wrap up once we get to the end of any questions. Adrian, is there a timeline in the executive's mind for the VR and CR process? Yes, mate, there's a timeline that we've spoken about, and the timeline is this. We want VRs to happen as soon as possible because we want people to make way for those who want to stay. So as soon as possible. But we do want it to be right, hence all of my earlier comments about making sure the EOI process was as accurate as possible so people can make informed decisions quickly for those who want to go, and not so quickly for those who want to stay. We believe there are options. There are options for people to take potentially leave without pay and hope things get better. JobKeeper makes it easier for the company to absorb costs whilst we're waiting to see what happens. There are other things that are unknown at the moment. We don't know what's going to happen definitively with Virgin in the next year or so. In fact, as I explained earlier, it's only going to be next week when we find out what they say are going to be the planes that they fly. How can Qantas know how much of the backfill they're going to have to take up? All right, Maddie, if it comes to CR, are all Sydney sections in the same bucket for the matrix? We asked them questions about that. They didn't know. We asked them what was the matrix going to look like. They didn't know. We asked them if they were going to use a matrix. They didn't know. They didn't know anything. Not in relation to Sydney anyway. Sorry mate, I can't answer that one. And of course, if people knew what the matrix was, it would make a more informed decision about whether you accept that expression of interest or not. Chris Beavers, will the company mitigate redundancy across the group? Yeah, we had a fair bit of discussion on that, and the question probably isn't as simple as will they allow people to transfer into ALAEA positions in Brisbane and Melbourne. I believe your question probably extends to a fictional scenario that I may create. So they had 50 jobs at Jetstar in Darwin. Could Sydney people transfer to Jetstar work? And we spoke about that specifically at the meeting. And also, we're going through a similar process at Jetstar, and we're asking, can people from Jetstar transfer into Qantas jobs? And we really didn't get any clear answers from them. Certainly looking like it's not going to be in question that can transfer to another Qantas job in another state, but the transfer to other parts of the Qantas group. However, we have written material that they've already released that indicates it can transfer to other parts of the business. And I spoke earlier about recordings and what is and isn't said. Jetstar hold meetings called town hall meetings, which I believe Qantas hold as well. And Jetstar held a town hall meeting in Newcastle a couple of weeks ago, and we believe they stated at that meeting that yes, you can transfer to other parts of the business, and we believe that meeting was recorded by management because every week they have a town hall meeting and send a link to the recording. We've asked for a link to that recording, and they haven't sent it to us yet because I think they know they said you can transfer to other parts of the group and therefore lock themselves in. So at the moment, I'd say yes, there would be possibilities to transfer to other parts of the business. And another part of the business that may assist those who cannot move out of Sydney may be jobs in the TSS areas, instructors and so on. I don't know exactly where that's going to land, but I know the expressions of interest there will be oversubscribed, and there may be some jobs in Sydney, but in one of those other roles. Danny Sasinka thinks that the matrix worked so well last time. I don't know. Well, what else are they going to do? They're going to put a list of names in a hat. Are they going to have interviews? It's scary thinking what they may or may not do. Back to Fergus, facing the next couple of years on very reduced pay, force some people to take the payment, whilst some may be refused due licensing retention. I don't know if they can refuse people and then retrench or tap someone. I think there's an obligation in the EVA to retrain. So if they didn't have a license and too many people with the much valued 747 license left, too many people with the 747 license left, I think they'd have to train people up to 747 to cover for those I think that's a process that's occurred in the past. The other part of the question was about some people may having to take the package because they're just struggling under financial stress. So I certainly know a lot of flight attendants are making those considerations. I mean, if you look at a flight attendant on a salary that maybe, I don't know, half of Alaea's, and they've got mortgages and that too, and some of them are really struggling on JobKeeper. I mean, JobKeeper for them is not as much of a drop as it is for you guys, but if they've got big mortgages, there will be lamies, there will be flight attendants and pilots and others who take a package just to get over the immediate financial challenges that they face. But just on my view about this, I was just talking to some of my friends today about the future and what it may or may not look like, and it's of course looking dire right now. But it's I guess it depends where you work, but I think the vast majority of our members have already hit 50, and there are or will or was going to be a lot of retirements in the next 10 or so years regardless. Some of those retirements may be brought forward because of what we're faced with. I think that the COVID problem will be with us for a couple of years. I think that it will be some time before we see the industry return to where it was. But when it returns and COVID is gone, I think it will escalate beyond what it was, say, 6 months ago. And I think that the industry as a whole will find that too many people who have retired, and I think our trade will be highly valued in a couple of years' time when so many people have moved on and they realise that they don't have the expertise there. Probably, my best mate, his stepson started an apprenticeship with Qantas this year, and I would be comfortable if I was an aircraft engineer apprentice right now, because I think that if you were young, you are in a very small minority compared to the demographics of those who want to stay. So the future, long term, may be okay for those who want to hang around, but understand that some people won't be able to financially, as opposed to wanting to head off into the sunset and retire. Garth Cox said, in the Sydney IM update, there was a warning about not using image or audio recording devices. What prompted this missive? Well, I wonder what may have prompted that. It may be that we've told them that we're recording meetings, and I will not talk to our legal position in relation to what we are doing at meetings with Qantas, but I may advise you should not record image or audio from the meetings you attend. We're doing it legally. If you are just sitting at a town hall meeting, you would not be able to do that. Darren asks, I believe if you take VR, you are locked out of re-employment by the company for 24 months. Can you confirm this isn't the case with CR? I think you are locked out no matter how you leave, Darren. There's no technical separation or difference between VR and CR. Everything is CR. And if the company were to say that it is VR, then technically you would be taxed at a different rate. I think the 24 months is a tax thing that allows you or permits you to get taxed at a lower rate by being retrenched or made redundant. I think the 24 months is fixed, mate. And for the moment, that appears to be the end of questions. And I'll ask if you guys have any more. I'll just hang on here for a minute. Otherwise, I'll go and have a bit of lunch and my afternoon nap. And And yeah, so it looks like there's not too much more. So apologies again, guys, for the dropout earlier and the troubles we've had with MS Teams. We actually ran a test on it last night and it worked. It's just when I keyed in 500 emails today, it just didn't send out the invites properly. So anyway, we'll try again tomorrow. I'll have a similar session to this tomorrow, which will either be a Teams meeting or another Facebook Live session. And I wish you all of the best over the coming period, guys. Stay safe. Ciao.